Greetings, everyone out there, and welcome back to Exploring Star Trek, where we are going through all things Star Trek, both old Trek, new Trek, and everything in between. I am Blake, and we do have a co-host this week, but alas, this is not Scott. Scott did not lose a bunch of hair and all of a sudden disappear on us. Scott has been busy with work, and we've not been able to connect, so I dropped over to our other show, which is Gray 17, a Babylon 5 podcast, and I borrowed one of our newbies and brought him over for a little discussion about Strange New Worlds. Justin is also a longtime Star Trek fan. Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you into Star Trek.
Like Blake said, I've been a Star Trek fan most of my life. I remember going to see the original series films in the theater because I was poor and really didn't have a whole lot of TV. I didn't really get to see a lot of the TV shows until later in life, but I grew up with the movies anyway. So kind of big fan of the original series. Of course, Next Generation. Didn't really get a whole lot into DS9 or Voyager, but I'm one of those Star Trek fans where I even like the Abrams stuff. I kind of find something to enjoy in all of it. So, and I've been watching Strange New Worlds since from the very beginning. So, becoming a big fan of that. And Blake asked me to kind of co-host with them. I've known this knucklehead for more than 20 years now. So it's been kind of cool to kind of do a lot of this Babylon 5 and now Star Trek with them.
And much like our Babylon 5 show, where Justin is a newbie to Babylon 5, and myself and the other first ones have to be careful not to give spoilers, we have to do that yet again because, Justin, you have not been given access to the screeners. Scott and I have seen the first 6. You have told us that you hate both of us.
I do. I get jealous when you guys get early access to a lot of that stuff, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get early access to something someday.
We're hopeful. We'll see what we keep going with. So we are here to discuss season 2 of Strange New Worlds, and we are already on episode 2. Ad Astra per Aspera, to the stars through struggle. So Justin, what did you think of episode 2?
Yeah, I actually power crunched. I had not seen episode 1 yet either, so I power crunched both of them this afternoon. Season 2, I have to be honest, there are not a whole lot of television episodes that will emotionally get me, but I got with this one. It kind of hit me pretty hard. It's right up there. There are a lot of Star Trek actually has a good history of good legal based episodes every now and then. The two that come right to my head are from Next Generation or the Drumhead and Measure of a Man.
Yep.
This surpasses both of them to me in my opinion. Like, it's especially considering what's happening with Una and what's happening in today's society, which I feel like this episode is a middle finger, a can of gasoline, and a match to a lot of things that are going on in this country right now. And like I said, it emotionally got me. I mean, that's how good this episode was. And I look forward to talking about it more.
Yeah, and I don't want to bury the lead on that either. When we were watching this for the first time, when Scott and I were going through it, we were about neck and neck with it. And I sent him after this one and said, hands down, I will call it right now, this is probably one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever made. I put this easily up there. You mentioned Drumhead, you mentioned Measure of a Man. Another one of my personal favorites is In the Pale Moonlight and Far Beyond the Stars from Deep Space Nine. And for me, this episode, in terms of how it handles social commentary, is so much the feeling of the original Star Trek, the way it handled some of the issues, but in a modern context. So for me, this is easily one of the best episodes of Star Trek that's been made. I actually kind of wish this would have been the opener for the season, though. To me, this is the stronger episode than what the actual first episode of the season was, with Spock stealing the Enterprise and going after Leanne.
To me, it made sense, though, because that's the way the first season kind of ended on that note. So I think they kind of had to bring her back before they could move on with this story, because she factors, because of her bloodline, she factors heavy into this episode. So they had to find a way to bring her back too, so that she could be a part of this story, and an important one at that.
Yeah, and I get that. I just, like I said, I think this is the stronger of the two.
Oh, very much so. It's the best episode they've done of the series so far.
So looking through the episode, we mentioned the various parts we like, and the legal dramas that come with it, and this one really gets into it with Una's trial, and it's not just her trial; it ends up being a trial of the Federation and their position on rules. You've got the lawyer, which I have to admit, I was also a fan of the series How to Get Away with Murder.
Was she on that? I never watched that.
It's good. I recommend it, but I kind of had the thought. When they found the lawyer, just the demeanor and the way the lawyer was, I'm like, they went and found Annalise Keating and put her on Strange New Worlds. Awesome. I know it's a completely different actress, but it's just the way that character was portrayed in the series kind of had me thinking, it's like, we're going to get How to Get Away with Murder in Star Trek. And I loved it. Especially that takedown of Admiral April.
Yeah, that whole sequence, April's testimony is, it's, I can see people say it's about, whataboutism, but it goes way more beyond than that, because it just shows that, especially, we're talking 23rd century, and we're still dealing with a lot of the same, social issues that we're dealing in 2023. And, especially dealing with what rules are okay to break and what rules aren't. You have something that is your number one sacred rule, the prime directive. Basically, in layman's terms, don't fuck with other cultures. And how many times have we seen that broken? And even they gave examples during April's testimony of the number of times that he violated it, in order to save somebody, in order to quote unquote do the right thing. So why is it okay to break that but not break this in this instance? And you can kind of, to some degree, Starfleet's hesitation with genetic modifications is understandable given Earth's history with the eugenics wars, and with Leanne's ancestor Khan Noonien Singh, with being like the most vicious warlord that ever walked the planet. And so you get why they have that rule in place, but also at the same time, it's a rule that is definitely seems to be outdated. And definitely, I think a good part of the trial addresses the reason why do you hold on to archaic rules when they're no longer justified to be in action, especially when you're dealing with issues like forced segregation, outlawing somebody, arresting somebody just for merely existing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, the whole trial thing, and especially when they finally put Una on the stand, it was just a brilliant stroke of writing.
And I think that's one thing this episode brings in, at least for me, a bit of the tragedy of it is, you have this impassioned argument. You have the panel of judges at the end who kind of say, maybe we need to look at this. Maybe we need to think about this. And those of us who are fans of Star Trek, spoiler warning, we know they don't. We know that change doesn't happen, because we get into Deep Space Nine and you've got Julian Bashir, who is genetically modified. And you see how they have other, what they refer to as genetically modified or augmented individuals in that series where it went wrong, and they're imprisoned.
And Bashir has to hide.
And yeah, Bashir has to hide.
That's what 100 years after these events take place, and you're still dealing with it.
Well, and even Star Trek Prodigy, which, by the way, side note, fuck you, Paramount. You had to cancel Prodigy and shelve it entirely. Sorry. But even at the end of Prodigy, you had Janeway before the Federation Council arguing to let Dahl in because he was a genetically modified individual.
Yeah.
So we know in the tragedy of this is, despite all of this impassioned argument and this consideration, that it doesn't change anything in the long term.
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of this emotionally gets you, is you notice for everything that happens, it doesn't do any good. And that's kind of yeah, agree. It's the tragedy of the story, because you're dealing now in the 23rd century and 24th century, and it still doesn't it's still a problem.
And, talking about the social commentary, some of the quotes in this episode from the defense as well about talking about, if a law is not just, how do you trust those who created that law to serve justice? And you think of all of the laws that have been passed throughout history that have marginalized individuals or been used to justify absolutely horrid things. And that question remains, is how do you trust those who created these laws to serve justice in the first place? And I think that is a very accurate quote. And this episode coming out during Pride Month of all times, I think is especially appropriate. And some of the quotes in there about where they're talking about Una, and some people have the ability to hide their modifications, others don't or choose not to. And you look at what is going on at the moment with individuals who are transgender, individuals who are LGBTQ SI+, and individuals who can be straight passing or cisgendered passing, and then there's those who aren't or can't from their mannerisms and different things. And you look at how society is reacting right now. There was a story just the other day as I was watching this episode again that came through talking about how there was a Pride festival, and I believe it was Tennessee, that has never been an issue, but this year they had to have SWAT teams on site and individuals checking cars as they came in to watch for individuals who may be there to cause problems. It's just interesting watching current events play out when you watch an episode like this that really aims at those particular issues of privilege and justice and laws that are meant for the common good but do harm to populations who have already been marginalized.
Yeah, and not even just with current events, but entire Earth history. How many times have we passed laws against, or against people based on slavery, the color of their skin, who they choose to love? And she even goes through the whole list, based upon their cultural beliefs, based upon their religious beliefs, and so on and so forth down the line, dealing from everything from slavery to Jim Crow to segregation to anti-Muslim movements right after September 11th and everything like that. And it's you wish that eventually, and that's one thing that I actually really applaud modern Star Trek for, because one of my kind of arguments against it is, like, especially kind of early on, you see it sometimes in the original series, and especially in kind of Next Generation, where everything's overly utopized, if that's a word. If not, I'm going to trademark it. But you see the shining utopia of the Federation, and I like the fact that now with shows like Strange New Worlds and even like Discovery, at least the good episodes, it kind of turns that on its head a little bit and shows that for everything that the Federation is, espouses, where it does do a lot of good, there's still warts on the face. It's still not perfect. It's still, I don't want to call it a human organization, because it's not, but it's still an organization led by imperfect, fallible beings. And so those problems are always going to persist. And the challenge is to rise above it and, rectify the wrongs that come up from your past, or, create a situation to where if there is injustice, you can eradicate it and you can rise above it, which is definitely what they attempt to do. And even like the Nera, I think is the name of the lawyer, right?
Yes.
Even she says when she's standing on the transporter pad at the very end, it's a start.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are with a lot of things. Even 70 years after the civil rights movement, we're still in that start mode. 40 years after the beginning of the gay rights movement with the Stonewall riots, we're still in that start. And I understand change is generational. You're not going to change overnight, and you're not going to change people's opinions overnight, but it's getting that start and then keep moving, which unfortunately is something with the bigotry towards enhanced beings, because like they even said in the episode, Una didn't choose this. This is just who she was born as. This was something that was brought upon her, no more than choosing to be black or gay. This
Yeah.
is just who she is. And it's still, unfortunately, in Star Trek, it's still, in start mode. You never, I hope maybe it gets addressed later on in future series where maybe they have some kind of future resolution, but we'll see.
Well, one of the lines that was covered in there, and you talk about Starfleet, was when Pike is in Neera's office and he's trying to get her to take the case, and it's, you discovered empathy. Let me know when the Federation catches up.
Mm-hmm.
That line, I've seen videos lately, especially with some of the bans around care for transgender individuals. And there's been some videos circulating of both lawmakers who are of a certain political party, as well as individuals who say they're members of that party, standing up, speaking against these bans on transgender care, because they're saying, it impacts my child. And it's like, that's great. You have found empathy, but the party you're claiming to support and be part of hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
That line where it was, just that, congratulations, Pike, you figured it out. Good for you. You're still representing an organization that hasn't. And, it kind of put that on Pike to reconcile that. And I did like at the end where, on the transporter pad, it's, you are a crew that is proudly serving under this person. And it's a start. And it is a start. But it's not the end.
No, it's not. And one one brilliant piece of writing from this episode that had no dialogue in it was when they kept flashing back to the captain's, I guess, ready room, or the conference room, where the entire main officer corps is all sitting there silent, and it focuses on each of them. And I wrote down in my notes in this many times, what is Pike thinking? What is Spock thinking? What is Uhura thinking? What is Singh thinking, of all people? Like, she's the one who I think, and I was always kind of wondering throughout this episode, if they end up taking down Una, are they going to come after people like Singh next? She's no more at fault for her genetic bloodline being the descendant of Khan, Noonien, and Singh than Una is for her genetic modifications. And you can even see that fear in Singh, where she doesn't trust herself. She's obviously, I even think, like, she even alludes to it in the episode, she's scared to death of what she has the capacity to become, because of the genetic modifications that are that are in her bloodline.
Well, and plus with the writing too, you can see that she thinks she's the reason Una got found out.
Yeah.
And we find out eventually it's Una that turned herself in. But there's that line about genetics is not destiny. You're not born a monster. You have both with capacity for good and for ill. And, I think that line hits it. But yeah, the whole Leanna, the acting in that role, to pull this off, where you see that conflict of someone who thinks, I've caused this, my anger, my spitefulness towards this caused this. And then to find out, no, it wasn't.
And just the guilt and the shame, and just even from the beginning of the very series, the guilt and shame that Singh carries with her, as a part of her character, that's why she's actually, probably between her and Chapel, are my two favorite characters on the show, just because of how well they're written and how well they're acted.
Now, you mentioned the conference, so let's take a little deviation here. And Scott and I have talked about this before. When it comes to this particular vision of Star Trek, and I'm with you. I liked 2 out of the 3 Abrams movies. Let's put it that way. I liked the first one. I liked the third one. And the middle one was the Wish.com version of The Wrath of Khan. Not a fan of it.
It has its good spots, though. But we can talk about
when the end credits roll. But, seeing how they reimagined the Enterprise for that versus this, to me, Strange New Worlds is, you can look at it, and it's definitely updated. It is more modern looking. But you can see that 1960s influence in the sets, in the design. You can look at it as they're sitting in these sets and say that's inspired by the original Enterprise. It's got the consoles, it's got those thicker, heavier pads. In the courtroom scene, which as a call out for a minute is, okay, y'all use the 31st century Starfleet command set from Discovery with a minimal redress. I get it. There's budgets, there's things, but Christ, people. I mean, it was a little bit of an obvious reuse of that set. I didn't even try to hide it type thing. But when they're sitting, the court reporters off to the side, they've got those little square, data chips like they had in TOS. We've seen the 3-sided monitors, the color scheme even. Yeah. So for me, this is much more, you can draw the parallels of the sets and they're beautifully done. They look stunning. Also that lounge set that they have, I think I commented on that in a previous episode as well, but they've got that new lounge, the crew lounge area.
That looks more 10 forward than 10 forward does, man.
Right. If I'm sitting there on the Enterprise D, I'm going, God damn.
Yeah, they had God, this is the 5th ship, and the original had a better lounge than we did.
Yeah, you had a better bar.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows?
They had a fireplace in theirs.
Yeah. Guinan could have been there the whole time too. Who knows?
Hey, it is possible.
But no, that whole, you know what, though, going to that scene, I did get a chuckle out of that. Because another character I love, Ortegas. I love the badass chicks in this series. Mm-hmm. All the strong female characters are wonderful, but Ortegas, she talks a lot of shit, and that's what I like about her. But her and the doctor, and Benga, right? Mm-hmm. They're sitting there having that conversation, and she's mocking the Vulcans.
Oh yeah,
and Benga just kind of takes her to task by saying they actually hate each other. And then Spock walks over and is like, I'm sorry you had to witness that outburst. Yeah. Like a very calm, collected conversation between the two. And in Spock's eyes, they had a knockdown, blowout, drag out, screaming argument at each other. And then it's just the difference on how a lot of humans still see, and even what would this be? 100 years after first contact?
Roughly, yeah.
Ish. 100 how there's still that unease between humans and Vulcans after a century, still don't fully understand each other.
And I love that they just started laughing after Spock walked away. And that is my one thing I will say is I hope, season 1, we saw most of the cast get their spotlight episode. Yeah. And I really hope we get to see Ortegas get that standout moment in season 2. One of my criticisms actually of last week, I don't know if you watched the video I did for last week's episode, but
I have not. No.
So you just watched it. And I will say my criticism in there is you had that scene with Mbenga and Chapel where they basically turned themselves into super Klingon ass-whooping soldiers that didn't really seem to make sense. I thought that would have been better for Ortegas to be involved in. And I believe that now even more with that scene with Ortegas and Mbenga in the lounge. That scene would have made more sense with it being Mbenga and Chapel, or Mbenga and Ortegas, than it did with it being Mbenga and Chapel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to jump back on, a previous episode, but that's one thing that kind of struck me as strange is like, so they take the steroid juice, and now all of a sudden they're, badass fighters, which I thought visually was actually kind of cool. It was kind of a cool sequence, and I enjoyed watching Chapel kick some ass. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it just didn't really fit. Oh, how are we going to get there? Oh, let's take steroids and then go fight. But no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and they don't use Ortegas enough yet. And I think because you have so many people in the core cast, I think maybe they're still trying to figure out how to give everybody that moment where they're kind of the center of attention. But I think Ortegas' time will come for sure.
Oh yeah, and they've even said in season 2 it's going to. The other part on production to comment on, we saw the dress uniforms that were seen in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And we've seen those before in TOS when they had some proceedings. And I think these were a great updating of those. They still had that very 1960s look to it. You had the different metal configurations on the chest of them. And I just thought it was very well done with the costuming on this one as well.
I mean, the costuming's been great from the beginning of the series, to be honest with you,
It
because
has.
they did take it straight out of the original series with a little bit of modern updates, of course. I'm kind of glad Pike's not walking around with that green sashy material like Kirk would wear every now and then. That just didn't make sense for a starship captain.
But hey, there's still time to get
But
Pike in the swarmy wraparound.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know what, and I'm sure it'll come. Just like with a lot of things that they've directly alluded to original series episodes in this show so far, like when they remade Balance of Terror last season. But I think that yeah, I can't so far give enough credit to the production staff and for the showrunners to, a lot of people give a lot of crap, to Alex Kurtzman, but I think with the handling of this show has been fantastic. It's definitely been an homage. It's a way of telling new Star Trek stories while still
Mhm.
paying great respect and homage to the original.
Yeah, this is Akiva Goldsman just absolutely in something he loves and enjoys, and
Yeah.
it shows with this one. So I think we've covered quite a bit of this one. We've talked about the court drama, and I think the last line I'll quote from it is, a law is not a mirror to society. A law is a beacon to remind us how to be our better selves. And then Nira encourages the Federation to be its better self, to live into those principles when talking about that big switch, that what she goes with, that cut back to Una's testimony, where it lays out about being persecuted, being fearful for their
Mm.
life, all of these pieces that led to she's claiming asylum. And then, sits there, says the rules apply when you want them to. All we're asking is that you apply the law with the same vigor as you were ready to apply this other one.
But I
And
think
it's just powerful the way that ended to me.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, going off of the writing, it is actually a very powerful way, and the way that they ended up taking the whole asylum route, which, unfortunately was nothing more than a lucky break,
Mm-hmm.
with what they were able to get. Even like they even said during the episode, this was just a technicality. But again, to me, and that's kind of one question I wanted to raise, and I'm kind of interested in your viewpoint with this, is you know, throughout the entire episode, or actually, I guess not throughout the entire episode, but at one point, it's kind of revealed that Nira really doesn't have any interest in winning the case. And she doesn't even really think she's going to until Singh brings that Starfleet regulation to her attention.
Yeah.
And it was never about saving Una. It was about slapping, you know, Starfleet across the face and bringing attention to the plight of, the Elysian people, and rightfully so. I mean, it's something that is obviously throughout the entire episode, you
Mm-hmm.
realize that these people have been neglected, ignored, persecuted, you know, just go down the list of all the horrible things that have happened to these people over time. And that's kind of where I struggle to really like Nira, to be honest with you, because I don't really think she ever had Una's interest in heart until she was basically handed a technicality by saying that got them out of the situation. So I'm kind of curious what you think about Nira.
Well, I thought Nira asked for that copy of the Starfleet code. I think Nira saw where she could go
You think
to get
so?
that out.
Okay.
And I definitely think she took the case, and Pike even dangled in front of her, at the start,
Mm.
was take this case and we'll get some of your other things taken more seriously, because this will give you this bigger platform. So I agree. She definitely had her own motives. I do think she wanted to help Una, but it ended up getting done in her own way.
Yeah, I guess she had to be realistic about it at the
Yeah.
beginning, but yeah, okay, that makes sense. But still, I just was kind of really feeling shitty towards her during a lot of that episode.
Well, I also, there was some animosity between her and Una because she resented Una for leaving.
Yeah,
And
and
I
that
think
was
Una's testimony on the stand, I mean, there's only so much you can do in an hour
yeah,
of television. And I think Una's testimony on the stand, if you were to extrapolate this out, I think that played into some realizations. That's the word I'm going for. God damn. Some realizations for Nira about her own opinions and what Una went through as well.
Yeah, and or why Una's family had to make the decisions that they
Yeah.
did. But and it's I mean honestly the way they took wasn't where I thought it was going to go. So it was actually kind of a nice, not nice because actually it was horrible circumstances, but it was actually very interesting. I'll say that interesting twist
Mhm.
of what caused their rift in the first place. Because I honestly thought it was like some kind of romantic entanglement or some kind of romantic relationship that went wrong. But it
If I say,
it
don't go
was kind
shipping
of
things on this podcast. We have
no,
enough on the
I'm
other
not
one.
necessarily I'm not going there, but that's kind of where it just had that feel to me.
Yeah.
But then the fact that it was okay, it was they, you know, just like apartheid, they enacted a segregation policy
Mhm.
and were separating them out. And Una's family was just passing enough to be able to hide their abilities where Nearest family couldn't.
Yeah.
So that's why they ended up getting separated, and Una's family took the route that they thought was going to be best for their family overall. And I can see where that would create, resentment. So Nira's feelings towards Una weren't unnecessarily, unjustified. But once she had more information and once she realized still what Una went through her entire life, yeah, I would agree with you. She does eventually come around. I just thought she was acting kind of shitty for a lot of the episode.
Mhm. So we can't really get into questions or predictions. As I mentioned, I've seen the next 4 episodes as well. So I can't predict anything or say anything because I'm pretty sure I'm legally bound not to. Justin, briefly, do you just have any thoughts or ideas of what may be coming next? I don't know if you watched the preview for next week's episode yet or not.
I didn't because Paramount Plus, at least on the Xfinity app that I was watching on, kind of cuts it off mid credits. So
Gotcha.
unfortunately, I didn't get to see anything kind of relating to next week, and I'm actually kind of okay with that. Now, I really don't know where to go for predictions from here on out because I know this show is not is a little bit more episodic
Hmm.
in nature. So I'm sure that we'll get some more references to kind of the events of this episode. And I don't know if anything's going to come from this trial or if it's going to have any. I mean, we know just from being Star Trek fans that it doesn't have any repercussions whatsoever on Starfleet policy. But maybe if I kind of had to say kind of any kind of prediction so far for this season, um, I'm kind of interested to see where if Spock's cavalier attitude towards things sticks.
Hmm.
Because he had no qualms whatsoever about disobeying every Starfleet regulation and stole a Federation starship to go save Singh in the first episode. And you really didn't get a whole lot of him out of this episode. So I know that at the end of the first episode, they were saying that they're just going to kind of pretend like the whole thing never, Admiral April just
Hmm.
kind of wants to pretend like the whole thing never happened. But then you get a little bit of, and I don't know where my tinfoil hat is right now, so I apologize, but you get a little bit of a hint of conspiracy at the very end, where even April turns out is involved in trying to reignite the Federation Klingon War. So,
So I'm gonna say he's. I think you misinterpreted that scene.
okay.
It wasn't that April was trying to reignite that. Is April was saying he may have saved us from getting into a second conflict with this other thing on the. They definitely set up an undertones of there's a pending conflict behind the scenes, and at the
And
end
there
of
are people on both sides who want to reignite the war.
there are, but that's
But
not what April basically says. Spock diffused that from happening, so they wouldn't be fighting a conflict on two fronts.
okay, I may have to go back and rewatch that then because I interpreted to mean that they're like, well, it to me it felt more conspiratorial than I guess maybe it really was. But yeah, I'll go back and rewatch it. But that's definitely, I'm interested to see where that storyline goes for sure.
Yeah, I'd go check that one out again.
Yeah, I'll watch it again for sure.
So, all right, I think that wraps up our discussion for Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 2. And we're looking forward to obviously seeing what comes next. Justin, I hope we get a chance to get you back on as we discuss more episodes. You never know what might happen as far as if Scott or I can't get our shit together and get our schedules coordinated. We may have you back on for future episodes as well
I'll be
to
happy to
talk
do it.
about more Strange New Worlds. So once
At
again,
least it'll keep me at least it'll keep me watching it. So
it will. You know, and I was talking to, we have another friend who's on our Babylon 5 podcast, Kevin, and I mentioned we were doing this, and he said, I have a hard time staying awake for some of these, and I'm not quite sure how, so we're going to have to dive into that someday as to how Kevin has a hard time staying awake for some of Strange New Worlds. Justin will be seeing him in about a week and a half. You and I may bring that up with him.
That's going to be a topic of discussion for sure.
We'll put a pin in that. But again, I'm Blake, and with me has been...
I'm Justin, everybody. Thanks for watching.
And this has been Exploring Star Trek. We hope you keep joining us on this journey. And remember, as always, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And let's boldly get the hell out of here.